Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Market Shapers. I'm excited to be joined by Chris Hickman from Ebby's Little White House. And a couple weeks ago during an episode you saw, because of our massive budget with sponsorships and advertisers, we were able to buy a table. Now we have mugs. And so, Chris, inaugural mug, cheers. There we go. Very nice. So we are big time here at Market Shapers now that we have coffee mugs. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for having me.
I always like to kind of start off with everyone's background, you know, kind of maybe what your first foray into professional career was, and then how you got into real estate, and just kind of take us through that process a little bit.
So I was in human resource management for about 10 years before I got into real estate, and enjoyed it, loved working with people. And then for some reason I just always wanted to get my real estate license, and so went through real estate school, and a good friend of mine who was with Ebby asked me to come interview with his manager, which was Rhonda Needham, still with our company. And so when I did, I thought, okay, this is the career for me. I love it, and realized it was a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. But went into that, and just I've been with Ebby ever since. That was 17 years ago. A few more gray hairs than I had when I started.
Hey, at least you still have them.
Yeah, barely, on this side. And then Rhonda, fantastic manager, and really taught me to kind of run things like a business, and which is what I understood from coming out of a business background, and it seemed like a really natural transition for me.
Yeah, and I assume after 17 years you must enjoy it. And
love it.
Yeah. Well, so 17 years, I mean, that's, you know, about 5 times the average lifespan of a real estate agent if you kind of look at it from a national scale. What are some of the things that maybe you attribute to your longevity and success? You know, something that other people could look to on, hey, if I really want to make a career out of this is not like a pit stop in my professional life. You know, what is it you look back on and think, yeah, that's probably some of the things that have allowed me to do this for 17 years?
I think the real key for me, and again, I give Rhonda a lot of that credit, is coming into it and looking. Really, the reason I got into it was because I thought, oh, I'm my own boss. I don't have to be at a meeting every week. I don't have to do this. I can go. I can have my weekends off, whatever. Yeah, I was shocked by that.
Yeah.
But coming into it with her and saying, you've got to run it like a business. This is not, yes, you're the only person in the business at this point, but you have to run it like a business. You're going to have a marketing budget. You're going to have a tax budget. You're going to have to be in the office, and at that point, you had to be there on tour, and you had to be at every MLS meeting,
right.
And you had to be at every office meeting, and truly that helped me set myself up to hopefully be in it long term, to run it like a business and realize that there is a marketing budget. Just because you get a $10,000 commission check,
right.
That's not your $10,000. You've got to invest back in your business. So I really appreciate that part of getting my career started from that, because I think it's really easy to all of a sudden have a great month,
right?
And you get to go on vacation and buy a new car, and buy a lake house or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I have no other sales for the next 3 months. But I really tried to discipline myself. Not saying I didn't make a lot of those mistakes along the way,
yeah.
And realize a year later that your tax bill is so high that you've got to work even harder to pay
right.
that. But I really tried to set it up to say, okay, I'm going to have to set some of this aside to pay marketing, to pay for an assistant, to pay for some, closing gifts, things like that. So I think setting it up like a business has really been the most successful thing that I've done in keeping the business long term.
Right. And then how much time do you find yourself, and maybe this is done quarterly or at the front end of the year, do you find yourself kind of doing that business planning as opposed to like what people would traditionally think of as like selling real estate?
Right. I think that's probably, that's probably 50% of it.
Right.
For me, another thing that I learned along the way is to hire the right people that know how to do that. I wasn't a business planner.
Right.
I don't know the tax code and those things, so I have consistently hired people that know, and that's part of that budget. Hiring people that know how to do those things and know how to do them correctly, and you get out there and be the rainmaker and sell, and let somebody who knows what they're doing with your taxes or your marketing do that part.
Right.
So, but it still takes a lot of time, and I think if you're not doing that, you're missing out on the future business. So,
did you have in the beginning, and maybe this is something that Rhonda gave you, or maybe this has changed over the years, but I know one of the questions I get from new agents a lot is, well, how much should I be spending on marketing? Like, have you ever found a generalized rule of thumb that, 10%, 15%, 5%? I mean, do you stick to anything like that, or is it really more based on the business need of what you kind of see for the year coming up?
I think in the beginning I kind of went off the 10%. 10% of your budget or 10% of your income is going to be marketing, and then as the market changes, I changed, and so a lot of times I think your first instinct is, oh, the market is slow. In 2008, 2009, when things got slower, your initial instinct is, okay, we've got to pull back.
Yeah, retract.
And coming from a business background and human resource background, it's really the opposite. It was like, okay, hopefully I've saved enough money that I'm going to be able to not just float living expenses, but also continue or be stronger with my marketing. Because at that time when so many people are getting out of the business because they can't afford to continue marketing, you got to remain. And so beefing up your marketing budget at that point is important. And I think so I ended up spending more money. So then some of those years, 25% of what I made was marketing budget.
Right.
So
what have you found, let's say in the current market that we're in, the one we've been in for the last maybe 18 months and looking forward, what are some of the things that you're directing some of your attention to on a marketing perspective that you have found to be effective in today's climate?
I think right now it is getting out there and getting the listings, getting as many signs in the yards as you can, and really putting yourself out there. Again, now is the time that we are spending more money in marketing. We've beefed up our marketing budget for the spring market because it has started off a little slower than maybe the past 5 or 6 years. If someone started a few years ago, you got into a market that was great where you barely had to stick a sign in the yard. It's not that market. It's a little bit turning the ship and saying, okay, we've got to price things a little more appropriately. We do have to, we might have been spoiled in the past where we didn't have to run ads or send postcards or spend money on that. But now is the time to do that, not only for your listing and marketing your listing, but getting out there and marketing yourself for for next year. Sometimes it's for next year. It may not see the results this year.
Yeah.
But it's keeping that long-term marketing and not mailing 1 or 2 postcards and thinking, oh, this didn't work.
Yep.
I've got to, I know it's a 2-year span. If you're not going to commit to it for a couple of years, don't do it.
Yeah, and I think that's right, because I think sometimes if you're just looking at generalized marketing or business advice, so many other businesses, the ROI turnaround is so much quicker. Like, run a commercial, track sales for 2 weeks, and we just can't do it that way. And we get that question a lot sometimes about, the brokerage running a TV commercial or a billboard, and it's you do want to track ROI, but it's hard to measure that because the life cycle is so much longer.
It takes a while.
What are treating it as a business, being kind of disciplined in what you're doing from a marketing perspective? What are some of the other things you kind of look back on that says this is how I made it for 17 years, and I'll do it for another 17 years? Well, I don't want to. Maybe you plan on retire before that, but
Probably
you're
never.
here for 17 years.
I'm
by
with
the way.
Ebby Halliday, so there's no retirement.
Exactly right.
So you got to follow her lead.
Yeah.
So another thing I think that I learned early on was initially coming into a sales job, because I wasn't in a sales job before. Coming into a sales job, you immediately assume that everyone is your competition. And something I learned early on is everyone is your sales force. They're not your competition. And your relationship with other agents is equal to, if not more important than your relationship with your clients. And I think that over the years, I think that anyone watching this, hopefully if you've done a deal with me, I can say that is part of what's kept me in this and kept, and it's helped my sales. Because I think when people see my name or do a transaction with me, it's been a pleasant experience. They know I'm going to guide the client in the right direction and be professional and return calls and do things that are going to help make the transaction easier. And keeping the relationships. I have some great relationships. I've been and visited just about every one of our offices and worked out of the offices and gotten to know the agents through my time here with Ebby. And not just with our company but others, but that has been invaluable to me. And having the relationships that I can pick up the phone and call and say, I need help in this area. Can you help me? Or just the fact that somebody will show my listings because they know that it's going to be a smooth transaction. Helps my clients and it helps me.
I think that's such a great point. We talk a little bit sometimes in the new agent training that, and maybe in some of the other sales professions out there where it's more of a one and done kind of thing. You can get away with that old style bulldog negotiator. But here it's such a small circle, even in a community the size of North Texas. It does your client no advantage if you submit an offer and the other agent gets it and they go, oh, it's him.
Absolutely.
Like to your point, you're doing your client a favor by being someone other agents look forward to doing business with.
Right, and I pride myself in that, and I sell that when I'm in a listing appointment and say, listen, I can tell you that if my name's in your front yard, it's not going to be one of those, and I will try for the rest of my career to keep that, that it's not one of those that you're like, oh, gosh, do I have to do it?
We love the house, but
right, I'm not selling you this house.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, and that's proven to, over the past 17 years to work for me. So I like being nice.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? And I think that's two amazing things, which is, treating it like a business and then really focusing on, creating relationships. We rolled out the new mission, and part of that is lasting relationships. And I think sometimes people think that means us and client, but to your point, it also means us and the other agents we work with, which is awesome. I love that. So when over the years, as you've seen new agents get into the business, what are some of the things that, and maybe it's a little bit of what we've just touched on, but what are some other things you've seen some folks maybe struggle with, and maybe not just see new, like people hit plateaus or they feel like they've kind of, they're hitting a slump or whatever. What is it you have typically seen as happening when folks experience that?
I think a lot of times agents feel like they spend money in the wrong places. And again, back to the people first and lasting relationships. That is so valuable. And instead of spending so much money on this gimmick or this marketing piece or that's all important and has been important in building my business. But the most valuable thing, another lesson that I learned early on was, having people in your home or building the relationships with your clients and being face to face with them instead of new business is really expensive to get. Repeat business makes you so much more money. And so being in that face-to-face, as much FaceTime or phone time as you can get with someone, pick up the phone, call them, or ask them to lunch or whatever. To me, that is where a lot of the new agents, these days, a lot of people don't want to do phone time or face-to-face or whatever. They want to text. And that's great, but anybody can text. But to say, hey, let's grab lunch, or let's do a happy hour, or come to my house for dinner, or get involved in their life and stay involved in their life in a genuine way. And to me, spending that time is so much more important than spending that money, because it's really easy as a new agent you're hit in every class with do this or spend this money here, or do and that is not always the most valuable dollar spent. As it is spending time with the person or with the people and getting their referrals.
And I think I think you're spot on. I was actually reading some statistics that Risk Media put out, and they kind of did a survey of thousands of agents, and what they found was that agents who the primary source of their business is referral based earn on average $76,000 more a year than the agents that are transactional, just always chasing a deal.
That's hard. That's hard work to do that. So
so there's more money in it, by being that way. So occasionally, I'm sure you're always working with people that are delightful as buyers and sellers, but I know occasionally, especially in a hot market or a market where there's tight inventory, sometimes we can kind of come across some challenges. So kind of maybe share some of your wisdom over the years of when you're working with a buyer that's challenging, or maybe a listing as well too. Someone where you're trying to give them advice, but maybe they're not always receptive to what you're trying to tell them will be the best thing to happen. Have you crossed those bridges over the years?
Well, I think going back to communication, it's natural to, when there is a problem with a listing, let's say, that you don't want to call them. You don't want to. You'd rather just wait for them to call you, or you'd rather ignore it or whatever. But I think picking up the phone, I always use sitting on the plane. You don't mind sitting on a plane as long as you know what the problem is, or what's the expectation. And so the same with a challenging listing is to say, hey, I have nothing to tell you this week. There's not been any marketing that's gone out. You've not had a showing. It is quiet. I have nothing to tell you, but I want to let you know I'm here and I'm working on this. And call them before they call you. And so to me, the communication, keeping the lines of communication, and I'm not always perfect at that. And I'm the same way. After this many years, you're like, gosh, I just don't want to call them with this bad news or with no news. But I think people really appreciate being communicated with. We all do in different parts of life. Communicate with me what's going on, or be honest with me. And I think a lot of agents are really afraid to give the bad news and say you're overpriced, because that's what they think that we're going to do, is come back to them and tell them we're overpriced. But we're their partner in this. We're not just here working for them. We're your partner. And if I feel like, I use the doctor analogy, if your doctor tells you, your dentist tells you to brush and floss and you don't do it, that's on you.
Yeah.
But if you follow these guidelines and you listen to me when I tell you we need to paint the cabinets or we need to adjust the price, have those hard conversations. One of the hardest ones I ever had to have was a house I walked in and I was just hit with smoke, and they still smoked, and the walls were yellow, and everything just smelled like smoke, and it was a beautiful house. And what my gut said was, they need to move out of this house and have everything painted, but they're never going to do that. But they did, because I had the hard conversation, and I said, you want to really know what's going to take to sell this house? And I was honest with them and laid out a plan. And I didn't go in saying, oh, your house smells awful, and this is, it's never going to sell. I gave them a plan and a way to get there. And after that, I thought, man, if I can get them to move out of this house and do all this stuff I just gave them, I can do anything.
Yeah.
And it worked. And those people are still so appreciative that I sat down and had that hard conversation instead of just letting them sit on the market and the third agent selling it.
Yeah.
So have those hard conversations up front with listings, and you're doing them a favor.
Well, and I think what you've touched on perfectly right there is that whole idea is that you have to go in. Is my objective to go in there and try to get a listing, or is my objective to go in and try to help them sell this house? Right. If it's just to be a listing, then by no means, never have a hard conversation. Right. Go get the listing, tell them what they want to hear. And I even remember that back in my days as an attorney, you'd be talking to a client, you'd kind of tell them the reality of it. And like, well, that's not what I wanted to hear. And I said, well, are you paying me to hear what you want to hear? Because you can go talk to Amir for free for that. Or do you want someone who has some expertise in this matter to kind of tell you what the real landscape is? Right. And I think that's what our jobs are, is you're right, to have those hard conversations.
Right. They think they're hiring us just to get it sold. Yeah. But then when you sit down and actually do your what's appropriate and go over with how I can help you, and I'm not just here to to sell your house, I'm your partner in this, and I'm going to guide you on how this is going to be most successful for you, then they trust you. Yeah. And they realize that you're in it for their best interest, and they listen. And it doesn't always happen. There's some people that say, heck no, I'm not doing that. Yeah. But that may be the time to say, this is not the right listing for me, or the right buyer or whatever. If I'm telling you that there is no houses in this price range, and you still want to look in that price range, I'm not doing anybody a favor. Yeah. So having the hard conversations.
The other thing too is you're not probably going to make it 17 years in this business and be successful as you are if you also haven't figured out a little bit of balance in your life and having fun. So how is it that you kind of bring that into your real estate career to make sure that you're not always kind of working to the grind and getting burnt out?
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, you definitely, your first so many years, you really got to be working every weekend. But I think the balance is very important. Mm-hmm. And understanding that, yes, it's okay to take some time off or to shut things down. And I don't post everything that I do on Facebook. I don't need my clients to know that I'm taking all this time off. But I really find it valuable to get out of town, to get out of town, and even if that's an hour away, to East Texas, just to get out and relax, take a little time for myself. My dog has been a big part of relaxing some days. But it's all about balance, because you do yourself a service and then you do your clients a service too. Because there are days when if you talk to one more person, you're going to say something inappropriate or handle the transaction differently than you would naturally. And that's when it's time to say, okay, I need to take a little break. Yeah. And working with another thing that's that's been successful for me over the years is working with other people, helping, finding a buddy or a partner or a group or a team, somebody that when you're at your wit's end, that you've got someone that you can turn to and say, I need you to handle this. We don't want to lose this client. We want to continue to successfully service this client, but I'm not the one to do it right now. Yeah. And so take this ball. And that's been huge for me to say, not be afraid to share something with somebody within our company and find the right person that is for them. And that takes a little stress off you as well. So. Yeah. Well,
and I think your point about getting out of town, I think in real estate, it's, some people talk about doing staycations. I think in real estate it's tough. If you're just at home, it's almost impossible to detach and stuff. So like I said, even if it's just an hour outside of town to do that. Yep. Well, I think this was amazing info for everyone, just to kind of hear how you've done it over the last 17 years. And I appreciate you sharing some of that wisdom and knowledge with everybody. And I think there's going to be some takeaways for the folks that tuned in. So I appreciate it. Chris, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Best of luck the rest of the year.
Thanks so much.
Thanks everyone for tuning into this episode of Market Shapers, and we'll see you next time.